Welcome everybody to No Data Found. This is episode 2. This episode I think is going to be a little bit more in line with what we want to make this podcast. So rather than just talking about stuff, we're going to talk a little bit about the technology. We're going to focus a little bit more, I think, on the why, not the how to. There's plenty of smarter people out there who've already gone through and have documented step by step how to implement Oracle technologies. We're going to talk about, okay, why would you do that? What would you use it for? What are some use cases? So with that, today we're going to talk about two things that are pretty popular. VMware or virtualization, VirtualBox, if you will, and Docker. What are these two things and why would you need either or both, or do you need either, or should you have either? But before that, I think we're going to talk a little bit about some news and some things that Jeff wanted to discuss.
Well, while you're watching this, I'm going to be at the beach for an entire week with my wife and all of my in-laws.
All of your
So don't be jealous.
How many in-laws do you have? Do you have more than two?
Both her parents are still with us, thankfully. Her brother and his wife and 2 kids, and then her sister.
Okay, so you got the whole crew.
And then our...
Nice, nice.
I'm
going to
the
be
designated
packing. As you can see, my astute viewers will notice there's nothing on the shelves. All those books there are being donated or shredded or burned or something. But yeah, moving is not fun. I don't recommend it to anybody.
Now you're just moving your family, right? You're not moving your in-laws with you.
Not well. That's the plan. Whether or not that happens, I will.
Do they have your forwarding address? Do they know where you're going? Or
I haven't given it to them, but perhaps they do. The fun part has been watching the packing process. My mother-in-law and wife have been leading the charge on that. I think we're not taking one sock and a broken dish. Everything else, there's some sort of justification to take with us. So that'll be fun.
Just make sure toilet paper is in like one of the first boxes that comes out. So you want last in, first out stuff.
Well, the fun is going to be, I leave 2 days before everybody else flies, and I'm driving. So it'll take me, I think, 2 days to get there, and we're trying to time me getting there right around when they get there. So we do have a car, because the other car is being shipped, of course. So
now
we don't even know
when they're flying first class, right?
They're flying on my mileage plus miles, so
so they'll get upgraded, and
they'll probably get an upgrade, and they'll probably get to keep part of the plane or whatever, right? Oh no, I'm driving. I'm not flying.
I was saying you're freight, when you're
right. Yes,
you're in a U-Haul.
I'll take it. I
don't know to feel more sorry for.
Who, me or them?
I've done. No, me or you.
Oh.
I think I feel some more sorry for you.
You've got a week with your in-laws or 2 weeks?
Just a week.
Just a week. Okay. I don't feel sorry for you at all.
Yeah. All right, we could do a whole hour on this topic.
We could, but
so today's episode, we're going to be talking about, as an Oracle developer, how do you want to set up your development environment? Right. So in most shops I talk to, DBA has set up a Linux OS, either virtualized or running on actual server hardware, and they're creating database accounts, granting privileges, and then passing those out, and maybe even a TNS names file for the environments to the developers. And the only thing the developers have on their actual boxes are the development softwares that they need. Maybe a Subversion or Git client, Eclipse or Visual Studio. Maybe they'll have SQL Developer, and maybe they'll have an Oracle client installed so they can do SQL Plus type stuff. But that's it. What we're talking about today are the developers who've decided to have their own private sandboxes on their machine. Like they want to be their own DBAs. Now, when I started out doing this, go ahead.
So most people I talk to when I do training at clients haven't even heard of this stuff. It's not that they're not using it, they don't know it exists. And I'm hoping we reach a segment of that audience with this, because it's one of those things that's game changing once you understand how to do it and how you can set it up. but it still amazes me. Usually it questions, during a break or while we're talking about, deployment, how many people use VMware? And it's just silence. Like, what's VMware? And maybe it's because their machines are locked down. Maybe it's because they've never heard of it. But yeah, it's huge. Things have changed a lot, and all for the better, I think.
Yeah. Well, when I started going on not even before I started going out on the road, when I started my Oracle career in earnest in like 2001, I had to have a database on my machine that I could rely on. And so what I did was I went and downloaded an Oracle Home, the server software from OTN, and installed on Windows and had a Windows service running for the database and the listener. And I did that for 10 years, and I thought that was the only way it could be done. And then I had these coworkers that started laughing at me. They're like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "What do you mean? What am I doing?" They're like,
they're
"You
probably
just need
laughing
VMware."
for other reasons, but
Oh, well, yeah, they were laughing for lots of reasons. But when they saw my kit or my setup, they're like, "What are you doing? Why don't you just have VMware?" So VMware has this interesting position where they are the Xerox of their space.
Right,
so when people say VMware, it's synonymous with virtualization tech, where you can have a file that represents an entire operating system and everything in it that is then run by a virtualization tech. So VMware is one of those players. They probably have the most name recognition. What I'm running today is VirtualBox, which is an open source tech that Oracle maintains. And then my team has built a VirtualBox appliance, which has inside of it, let me share my screen. So on my screen now, I have this VirtualBox appliance running. So on my machine, I have, it's Windows 7 operating system. I have another reason to laugh at me. I have 16, I have 16 gigs of RAM. Which isn't required, but I say the more RAM, the better. And really, any developer needs at least 8, if not 16. I mean, I think you can get a new machine today with 64 or even 80 some gigs of RAM.
Oh, get one of those new MacBooks for $8,000. You could pimp it out, get 4 terabytes of SSD storage, 32 gigs of RAM.
I saw on Twitter that you have to put those in the freezer every now and then. They get hot or something.
Yeah. They've underclocked it, so the new i9 runs so hot it actually self-manages it. The temperature sensors kick in and say, "Hey, slow down, otherwise you're going to melt a hole in the aluminum casing."
So if you've got $3,000, go buy yourself one of those.
Dude, 8, not 3, $8,000 if you want to pimp it all the way up. $8,000. Yep.
I'll just put that on your boss's expense account. He won't notice.
Hey. Hang on, let me go.
This right here, what I'm showing you is free. What I'm saying is you needed to have on a machine with at least 4 gigs of RAM, which is laughable at this point.
Yeah.
But what I suggest is that you save 2 gigs of that memory to run this VirtualBox image or appliance.
So when you're saying these numbers, keep in mind, this isn't for production, right? This is literally one user on your laptop, building, testing, running, probably a smaller subset of your data. So 2 to 4 gigs is probably enough. I'd probably go with the 16 gig laptop if I could, and then you could allocate 4 to 8 to the VM. But yeah, it's going to be fine.
So I have a machine inside of a machine, basically. And I'm saying to Windows, to VirtualBox, the admin piece, let this machine inside the machine have 3 gigs of memory, give it 2 processors, and some other things. Like you can control the network. And the other nice thing is I have multiple machines I can spin up. I have a really old machine from 2012 or even older that's got 11G R2 on it versus 12202. And when my machine starts up, I don't have to wait for the Windows service to start and to kick my database on. And if I want to shut the database on and off, I don't have to do that through the operating system. It's really just a matter of coming in here and clicking the start and stop button. And I can even take snapshots. I'm going to get ready to do something really destructive, really bad, like one of those what if scenarios, like what would happen if I deleted a file that represented one of these disks. With the snapshot in place, I can literally like hit the go back in time button, and the image just comes right back with like what it was.
So one of the demos I did, I would edit a Oracle data file with VI just to show how encryption works and how if you enable encryption after the fact, there may be artifacts in the data file. So yeah, the snapshot thing came in real handy, because if just my habit of :W, my fingers just hit that combination on the keyboard, I might have just changed an Oracle data file while the database is running. And anyone who's used Oracle for a while, that's not the smartest thing to do. So the snapshot solved that problem. Right before I would do that demo, I would take a snapshot of the whole instance, operating system, database, it all comes in one file. And then I knew if I screwed this up, I could roll back to that snapshot, and it was like that nothing ever happened, right? So it's as a developer, hey, I want to change this key, and I've got a script that's going to touch every single table. I need to run this flawlessly because at some point we run it on prod. Take a snapshot, run your script, watch it fail, roll back, right? Modify your script, try it again. That alone is worth the price of the VM, which in your case is $0. So it's absolutely essential.
So the other thing about a VM is you've got a GUI available to you if you have a graphical interface for your operating system. In this case, I've got Oracle Linux, and I've got the Oracle Linux desktop here running. So even if I'm not a Linux pro, you don't have to be fluent in sed and awk and grep and CD or VI. You don't even have to know VI to use this image. And we have the GUIs built into the desktop, which I actually don't recommend you use. I don't recommend you run these GUIs inside this image, because then the image is fighting for resources for the database, which is what you want this image for. I'll have to edit that out. And resources for the software. What I do recommend you use this GUI for, only for, are these labs. So people don't realize this is a button. You can double click on that. And these labs are hands-on labs. Yeah, it's a very large red button, very tricksy. And the various teams at Oracle have built labs to show off different features in the database. My team has built ones for ORDS and SQL Developer and the Data Modeler. The Apex team has a collection of labs on here. We have labs on here for Database Cloud Service. But just really quickly, these labs are really point and click, screenshot, cut and paste code. They show you how to quickly, do things. So this is meant to be a learning tool or a learning environment. This is not meant to be used for doing core business stuff. This lab itself, or I'm sorry, this image itself. Let me switch over to PowerPoint mode. Has a lot of cool stuff on it. So I already said it's got Oracle Linux 7. More importantly, it's got the latest version of the Oracle database. It's got the latest, well, almost latest version of REST data services and Application Express and SQL Developer and the Data Modeler and SQL CL. We populate this database with all of the sample data. So when you go download the latest version of Oracle database and you install it and set it up, there's no HR, there's no order entry, there's no sales history. We load all of that sample data in there for you, and we give you these labs. So we've tried to make this as simple as possible for you. You're not going to be running SQL Dev inside the desktop, inside the virtual image, because again, you're fighting for resources. So what I'd like for you to do or think about is having SQL Developer installed on your desktop like you normally would. And then when you connect to it, you're going to connect to localhost. Because what we've done is this network trickery. It's called a port forward. And I've got a couple of them on here. The only one you absolutely need for SQL Dev is this one right here. And it says, take all the traffic from the host and forward it to this port on the guest, which is the listener port for the database. So when I'm in SQL Developer and I'm doing all my demos, almost always all my demos, I'm talking to localhost 1521 ORCL, which makes it super easy.
Yep.
Now, if you've got something already on 1521 on your machine, just change the port forward. Connect to 1525 on local and have that go to port 1521 on the image. All right. So to get started using this, if you like this sort of idea, it's going to be less experty required than what Scott's about to show. Okay. So what you need to do if you buy into this idea is you need an Oracle single sign-on account. You probably already have one if you've ever downloaded Java or SQL Developer or an Oracle database. You need to download and install VirtualBox, which again is free. That won't take very long. Then you need to download and install this image. And this image is pretty big. It's about 5 gigs to download. And then when you expand it on your hard drive, it's going to be 15 gigs of space. So you'll just go into VirtualBox and you'll say import appliance, and you'll point to this file that this has, and you're going to click start. And that's going to take, depending on how fast your machine is, you can do it as fast as 5 minutes, or it might take you 20 minutes. When it's up and running.
Don't do this in an airport
just go
or a hotel.
Yeah, don't do this in an airport. Don't wait to the conference Wi-Fi space to do this. But once it's up and running, you can immediately go to SQL Dev and say, go talk to localhost 1521, and you're in this environment.
Did I ever tell you I was streaming from Plex over VPN on a flight once?
No, but it sounds like something you would do.
Yeah, it really probably totally angered the rest of the plane, but I only did it just to prove that I could do it.
I will say about this image, you can use this for production work. You just need to build it and maintain it yourself and make sure that the licensing is all kosher. What I'm saying this image specifically for is free to use for educational purposes. Our team puts it out to make learning the database, learning REST, learning Apex, learning SQL Developer, learning SQL all that much easier.
Right. I was going to mention this is the OTN license. I'm not an Oracle sales rep, so I don't know all the specifics, but working with it for a few years, learned a thing or two. The OTN license lets you just tinker, right? So you can download this and build your own little demo systems and learn stuff and go through the labs. What it doesn't let you do is the second you write a line of code that's going to end up in production, then you need a separate license. So mileage may vary depending on how your organization is licensed. You do want to check with somebody who can say, yes, you could use a VM to do development for production, or perhaps you need an additional license. That's all going to depend, and obviously we can't answer those individual questions.
Yeah, and there's a little bit of maintenance you need to worry about on this machine. As you start to use it over time, archive logging is enabled, and there's some tracing on. So those files will grow, and they will eventually consume the space that you have in your image. So you just need to come in here and periodically clean stuff up.
Or just make the image bigger, which...
Or add a disk to the image, which you can go Google, which isn't the easiest thing to do in the world in VirtualBox.
It's not simple. There's definitely good step-by-step articles that show you how to do it, but you're going to get into some of the underbelly of Linux management and things like that. So definitely not impossible to do, but you might want to be a little cautious when you do that. Take a snapshot.
One last parting word on this. This is extremely robust, reliable tech. I've been running this on Windows 7. It has gone through multiple blue screens of death with the image running. I have never lost a single block, byte, or bit of data, and I've always been able to bring my system back up, and that's even including 5 minutes before I'm due to go do a customer talk or a presentation at a conference. It's never let me down. I've had to Google a few times to get through a couple error messages, but this is robust stuff.
So I've been a VMware user forever. ever since probably the first version came out on the Mac. I even used it back in my Oracle days when I had a PC. It's evolved a lot too, and it's definitely stable and very cool technology. Having said that, I'm using like the tip of the iceberg of it, right? You could virtualize servers, you can virtualize environments.
Oh yeah.
You can have
well,
all
the Oracle
kinds of
Cloud
servers.
is a collection of virtualized machines.
Yeah, Amazon too, right? All of them. That's all, or
Yeah.
unless you're getting the bare metal stuff. It's super sophisticated, and there's, people who spend all day just dealing with this. From a developer client point of view, it's pretty basic, right? You spin up an instance, you've got your database, you've got whatever it is that's in there. You want to install something, you go ahead and install it. You want to remove something, you remove it. In that sense, it just works. So
And you're your
why-
own boss. You can
Yeah.
do
Yeah.
whatever you want. Like
Yep.
the DBA says, no, sorry, I'm not going to turn on the debugger for you. Who cares? You've got your own debugger.
Yep.
You just get your code and your sample data in there, and you can do whatever you want. And then when you're done, you export that code out and you check it into the real system.
Yep. And that's one of the beauties is I want to upgrade Apex, 4.1 to 4.2 back in the day. I would literally right click on the VM file and do copy and then put it in a different directory and then start up the second copy, upgrade that to say Apex 3.2 or 4.2 or whatever. And all my demos, all my files, all my data would literally be there. And once I'm happy with it, I would just drag the 4.1 version to the trash and reclaim 20 or 30 gigs of hard drive space in the process. But yeah, it's a great little self-contained environment that, building Apex Cert, we used it all the time, right? Because the challenge of Apex Cert was installation. So I would get an Oracle 10G database and I'd get an 11G database. And I would run the installer script on one and I would see how it failed and I'd fix it and I'd restore my snapshot, rerun it, fix it. I can't tell you how many times we did that. And then we would do it for different versions of Apex. So we'd take 10G with 4.0 and 10G with 4.1 because there always are the little nuances that we'd have to handle. And using VMware to do that just made life super easy. So
Now that
VMware-
you've reminded everyone how old we are,
Right.
let's talk to the new kids and
Yeah.
get into this hot stuff. I would say
So-
hot shit, but this is a PG podcast.
Right. Well, we'll beat that.
Docker. Tell me about Docker, man.
So I think I can tell how old you are depending on which technologies that you use. So if you're VMware, you're probably like 35 or older. If you're Docker, you're under 35. If you're neither, you're probably like 45 or 50, right? It's just like these ranges of age and what we feel comfortable.
I feel like you're being very generous. I think what you want to say is we're a lot older.
We might be on the edge
When you
of
say
one
35,
of those
you mean like
categories.
45.
Right. And not to,
The
not
internet
to
takes 10
I don't,
years off.
I don't, yeah, the camera adds 10 years right back though.
Yeah.
I don't want to sound discriminatory and say if you're old, you don't get it. It's definitely not the case, but
Well, what
it's
you're
definitely,
using is what you started out with. What you learned starting out
Yes.
with is where you stay a lot of
Yep.
times.
Yep.
And people starting out today aren't starting out with virtual. They're starting out with Docker.
Right. And that's where I've always struggled is I've been using VMware forever and I like it because I'm comfortable with it. I know you're right. Like I could take my laptop and smash it. And then when I restore the drive and everything, VMware will just come right back up. Every once in a while it gets quirky and it hiccups, but yeah, I can
It's
count
not broken, so
one or two
why
times.
fix it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've always considered my VMs volatile in the sense that anything on here I don't expect to keep. So demo builds, I would always do scripts and just run the scripts. So this way everything's backed up. But everyone's been talking about Docker. Every conference I go to, it's Docker, 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 right? Everyone's got this thing where I'm like, why? Why would you change what you're doing? VMware works just great. And there are some reasons to use one versus the other. But my big thing is one, yeah, I'm old, but I'm not against change. I need to see the reason for the change. And sometimes that means I've got to kind of figure it out on my own. All the Docker documents and videos, I think just leave out 2 or 3 key things that prevented me and maybe a lot of other people from even investigating it. VMware is tangible, and I'm all about being able to control it. I don't know how they make Linux run on a Mac, but I know they do, right? So that's fine. I can get over that hump. But once I'm in Linux, I have complete control. ls, ps, right? I can do all my Linux commands.
You just named the two most powerful commands.
Both of the ones that I know. But,
LS, woo.
but I could see the disks. I could install stuff. If I want to download Tomcat, I open up Firefox on Linux in my Linux VM, and I go download Tomcat and I install it. If I want to drag a file from my Mac to the Linux VM, I literally just drag it and it's there. So happy place.
Sell me on this Docker stuff. Tell me why I should leave my comfortable place and come to the outside where it's dangerous and cold and animals are chasing.
Here's one of the. But before I sell you, I have to explain why it's okay. So I'd installed Docker. I think I saw Roll Hartman's Docker for Dummies presentation, and I'm like, yeah, that looks pretty cool. Let me install it. I install it, and it's a little GUI thing on the Mac with a drop down. And I'm like, now what? Like, where's the pretty image that I can click on to get a Docker thing, right? I didn't even know what it did. And I literally just left it there, right? So it was installed about 1.5 years ago, and it's sat on my Mac and has done nothing until I finally looked at my VMware demo system. It's Oracle 11G, 11.2.04. So I have patched it. I have done some DBA
that's cutting
stuff.
edge compared to a lot of our customers.
True. And it's Apex 5.1.4. I could get it to 18.1, right? Let's be honest. That's easy enough for me to handle. But I'm still not on 12c. And could I upgrade the database? Yeah, I've upgraded my shared databases before, but I don't have time to do that. So I said, all right, I'm going to make the change. I'm switching to Docker. I'm going to do it blind. And all my demos are going to be on Docker from now on. So here's where I started. I've seen Martin present, not on the Docker stuff, but on his Apex APIs. Martin's a great presenter. He's been doing Apex for quite a long time. So I figured, let me start with his blog post, which is really a GitHub document. GitHub's going to be another topic for another time. But I'm not going to go through the step by step. Suffice it to say, if you follow his steps here, it works. What I learned from this was a couple things. Is once everything was installed, what it did was create a Docker directory on my local Mac. I was like, okay, so I get that. In that Docker directory, part of the instruction said download and install Apex, and I put 5.1.4 and 18.1 on here. I'm like, okay, I get that. Those are just the install directories. It also created an Oracle directory, and this was my aha moment. So Docker has this concept called images. And if I switch over to my terminal here, if I type Docker images, it'll list the images that I've actually downloaded and installed. So an image is kind of like, to us old guys, a DVD or a CD, right? So this is Oracle from the Oracle Container Registry. This is a different implementation of Oracle that somebody else created an image, and evidently 7 months ago I decided to download it. This is an image for ORDS that I downloaded and installed, and it's a lot smaller, as you can see. These images are nothing until you actually spin one up into what's called a container. So if I type Docker container ls, these are the current running containers I have on my Mac. So I've got Oracle, I've got ORDS 18.1, and I've got ORDS 5.1. So it's a little confusing because you don't see ORDS 18.1 or 5.1 up here. And the reason is they're both running this ORDS container. I just have them configured slightly differently when I created the container. So the Oracle file or the Oracle container is running from this image here, and you can see that is the same as that, right? So that's 12.2.01. That's provided by Oracle. We'll talk about licensing in just a second here. But I've got two different ORDS containers running. And notice the only thing different here is the name and the port mappings. So 32.5.1.4 is my ORDS 5.1 container, And 32181 is my ORDS 181 container, obviously named to map to the corresponding version of Apex that they support. So going back to this directory structure here, here is my ORDS 5.1 config default XML file. If you've ever configured ORDS, this isn't new. This is the file that you use to basically configure which instance of Oracle or which database name, the service name, and all the different parameters of ORDS that your ORDS is going to talk to. I've got one for 5.1, and then I've got a slightly different one here for 18.1. And if you notice here, the service name is just slightly different. This one's going to Oracle PDB 18.1. The other one was going to Oracle PDB 5.1.
Yep. But these are files on your Mac.
These are local files. So if I wanted to change it, I could edit this and then destroy the container. But the configuration file, because it's local, it's not in the container, it's not in the image, will persist. And that to me was like the eureka moment. Not so much with the ORDS, but more so over here when I started exploring this directory and saw Aura Data, right? Aha! Aura Data is Oracle data files. And sure enough, these are the data files for the 3 PDBs that this instance of Oracle has. A couple I created, a couple that were included with it. There's also a control file.
Hey, let's open a text editor and change a file and see.
Let's do it, right? If I want to open this, well, this is running right now, so yeah, it would probably mess it up, especially if I saved it. But this made all the sense in the world because now the Oracle container is literally an appliance, if you will. It's running the Oracle software, all the binaries. It's looking over here, right? So if I were to go ahead and I'm going to run this command that basically docker exec, I'm going to use the container Oracle, and then I'm going to run this little bash command to create a bash shell. I'm now SSH'd into the Oracle container. And if I do an ls, you can see that I've got this ORCL directory. And if I cd into it, look at that. UO1, UO2, UO3, UO4. If I do something like that, I now have a small text file called hello. And if I come back over here and back up, there it is, right? So those are obviously linked. This made so much sense to see. I get it now. Docker's going to start the database. It's going to start ORDS. And once it does all that, all the database files were going to get updated on my local machine.
Yeah. Is it fair to say, Scott, that one's knowledge of Linux will be somewhat of a limiter in your ability to be successful using Docker?
I don't know. I think it would definitely help if you're not good at navigating the file system and doing basic tasks in Linux. I would think you're going to be a little hesitant to use it, and you might be a little bit lost. But to me, the why is, okay, this is a great demo system for me now, because I know once I've got stuff done, I could literally take this directory and not move to the trash, but copy it
yeah,
and back it up, right? So if I want to do my own backups, I could do that. Now, granted, I better have that database shut down, right, before I do that, because that's one of the advantages of VMware. I could pause it. I don't need to shut the operating system down, and I can move that VM around.
Yeah.
With Docker, since this is an Oracle database, you've got to understand how the database works to manage it. So my experiment was, what if I put Docker on Dropbox, right? And I put this database, all my data files on Dropbox. It worked. The problem was anytime the database writes to any table, be it sys, be it audit, Docker says, oh, hey, this is a new file. Let me go ahead and throw this over to all the other machines that are sharing it. And if you look at some of the sizes of the files here, right? So even system is 367 megs. It got chatty, and there was definitely latency involved. So that experiment kind of failed. Could you create your own database and perhaps instead of do a 500 megabyte table space, have 10 megabyte chunks? Sure. You're going to have more work there because you're going to have to create additional data files rather than just set one to auto extend. So I haven't quite
Yeah.
solved that problem yet. I think right now what I'm going to do is build on my iMac. Once I get a PDB prepped for a demo, I will just literally take this and drag it over to my MacBook. And now I've got all the demo stuff that I've worked on ready to go. I could go on the road, do my demo. And when I come back, perhaps drag it back and overwrite if I did some changes. Perhaps not, right? That'll totally be up to me.
I mean, I see a couple advantages with Docker. It seems to be a lot skinnier than.
It's definitely skinnier than the VM.
I mean, it's designed to be modular, right? So, I mean, you could have, and a lot of people don't have a single Docker container running. They'll have 3, 4, 5 running. Whereas in the VirtualBox or VMware world, you'll have one big one running that has everything in it.
Right. It's just a different way to deploy stuff. One of the things that I haven't got into is the scriptability of this, right? So Docker, you could create Docker files, which have all this configuration information in it, pass variables to it, which is how I installed the ORDS containers. And now I could automate a lot of this stuff. So when you get to this continuous integration and DevOps and all this other stuff that all the younger end of the spectrum seems to have mastered, and I think the older end just kind of looks and shakes their head like, why would you do all that? It starts to become a little bit more clear as to the benefits of some of that. Now, I haven't gotten that far. I haven't done any integration with continuous integration and scriptability and all that kind of stuff. I'm just happy I've got my own little Docker instance up and running. But that to me is the difference is I feel safe now. I feel like if my containers get destroyed, I'm okay because I've got a set of data files that I know will come up and run. And in theory, I should be able to take those data files and move them around, perhaps to a different server.
Yeah. I mean, there's only 2 reasons I'm not on Docker now. My system is always up and running, and I always need it, and it's not volatile. I mean, I'm not destroying stuff and rebuilding stuff from scratch. If I were, tomorrow I'd be on Docker. Then the second reason was I tried to do it last year, and I have Windows. And last year, Windows and Docker were not best friends.
Right.
But I think that's much better today.
It has to be, yeah.
I also had issues with Docker on Windows because what Docker was doing on Windows was actually creating a VirtualBox image to host the Linux that it uses. Right. And that was screwing with my existing VirtualBox kit. And I think that's also been fixed in the last year. I know most of the people that you and I are friends with are all on Macs because we're the cool kids. But in corporate America, 90% of everyone's on Windows.
Yeah.
So I think the Docker conversation for Windows is now actually viable for almost everyone. And the learning curve might be a little higher. The VirtualBox VMware learning curve is very shallow. I mean, like I said, download 2 things, click a couple buttons, and you're up and going. So, pros and cons.
It is scary, and like I said, it's more scary because most developers and DBAs are a little bit of a control freak. And to see the first time I installed it, here's an Oracle database, I have no idea where the files are, right? What happens when I stop this container? Does it delete everything? Does it go away? And yeah, it did, because some containers, everything is self-contained. The data files are in the container. And that's something you've got to test and make sure that it's not set up that way. Otherwise, that could be pretty bad. So a couple websites I want to point out. We'll put the links on the show, of course. This is Gerald Wenzel. He's one of the database product managers. This is sort of the official take on how to install Docker with Oracle. There's a little hoop you have to jump through with regards to accepting a license. It takes 10 seconds, and it's no different than if you installed it, the regular way. But again, I'm not going to go through step by step. He's done a great job of documenting it. Over here is where you would actually get your containers from the Oracle Container Registry. Now notice that it's an Apex application, right? So it's a really nice looking app, but essentially it's just set up here to show you where the different containers are, the different containers that Oracle supplies. So
And there's
maybe,
a bunch of them, not
yeah,
just the database stuff.
right. Maybe I want to kick around WebLogic, right? So
I probably don't.
no, but I've got a lot of clients who use it, and at some point I'm going to have
Yeah.
to figure it out. So rather than get a server or try to install it on my Mac, I'm just going to download
Oh
and
my
install
God, yes,
the WebLogic
definitely. If
server
there's a
container.
Docker image,
Yeah.
billion times easier than
Yep.
doing. Yeah,
And it
WebLogic
makes
is a
it
monster.
right, but it makes it easier that if I want to play with one of these things, I don't really have to know too much more about how to install it and go through the installation. I just click on
Yeah,
it.
you just run the Docker command.
Yep.
Yeah, it's
Just
nice.
go through and spin up the Docker container. And if I don't like it, I just delete the container and delete the image, and I'm on my way, right? It's really nice in that sense. Here's that presentation I talked about from Roll Hartman, Docker for Dummies. He does a great job presenting it, and I think if I were to go to and sit in it again, knowing my little aha moment, I'd probably get a lot more out of it. And then lastly, just to prove it works, right? So here it is, port on my local host 32514. This is obviously Apex 5.1. And if we log into the internal
Obviously.
workspace, you can see that, well, down here, right, 514. And then over here, just in a different PDB, this is 18.1. Anyone would know because you have the new remember workspace and username option there. But again, I'll log in just to prove. Here's Apex 18.1. Both running in my containers, both running locally, both just amazingly fast and responsive. Just like anything else, you kind of have to like spark it up. We used to say cache it a little bit, and then it just gets to be
The bits
super
need
fast.
warmed up. That's all.
Yeah, you
just
just
throw a
gotta-
little gasoline on the fire.
Yep. So yeah, I encourage you to try
Well,
it, but just understand, I took like 3 hours on a weekend to go through it. It wasn't just double click and be up and running. It took some time to go through the installation instructions, understand them. I think everything worked the first time, but there might have been a couple things that I looked at and said, oh, I could do this way. And then I tried it. And again, I learned a lot more by trial and error versus just reading a document or watching a presentation.
What Scott is saying, he doesn't read the docs.
No.
He just downloads stuff and
Just
clicks buttons.
run a bunch of
No
commands.
one else is like that.
Nah.
Well, I hope we've sold folks at least on the possibility of imagining a time when they have their own sandbox on their own machine and they can do what they want. Even if that's not kosher on your work environment machines, you can go home and do this stuff on the weekends because you have no life or you want to avoid our kids like Scott and I do.
Right. Just say you're working, say it's real work, and then the family
Just put the
leaves you
headphones
alone.
on.
Yep.
Yeah. The headphones, that trick works better if the headphones are plugged in.
Right. And the bigger the headphone, the more serious the call is.
Oh, yeah.
Right. I've just got
Yeah.
these small
Hey.
ones in, so I'm expecting the door to just barge open and someone to ask what's for lunch. But
You're just messing around.
so yeah, if I could do Docker, someone who just a couple weeks ago was just not against it, just didn't see why. Take some time. Like I said, just go through it, use those resources, and see if you can get it up and running, because it is a viable way to do stuff, whether it's personal development, whether it's education, or whether it's true, continuous integration type stuff. Definitely check it out. So
Well,
I think
it's going to help you in your next job interview
absolutely.
because you're going to go to a place and
Wait,
that's how
are
they're
you
going to do
saying-
things.
It hasn't been more than a month. I don't think I'm going to be interviewing that soon. Oh,
Well,
you as a
you should-
viewer. Oh,
I mean, no, you've got at least 6 weeks before your job title changes. I'm saying for other folks out there, when you go into the dangerous world out there,
right.
right. They're going to be doing stuff like Git and Docker and
Yeah.
all the Kubernetes and Kafka. And,
Oh,
you
yeah,
know,
yeah.
you just need to be aware of this stuff so it doesn't hit you
Yep.
upside the head.
Git. So I'm still a Subversion fan. I don't get Git yet. Maybe that's my next
'Cause it's
millennial
completely
technology. Right.
It is completely different.
It
Yeah,
is.
our team just switched from Subversion to Git.
Shudder.
The benefits are obvious. The work to get there. I'm glad I'm not doing it. I just observe.
Right. Well, maybe one of the next episodes we'll focus on Git.
We can have Chris on, and he can tell us about the Subversion to Git.
Yeah, we're not going to
journey.
do the work. There you go. Actually, that's a good idea. Speaking of episodes, I think we're pretty much out of time on this one. thank you everybody who has followed or watched. We're up to how many 100,000 views? Was it 1 or 200?
0.0001 views.
It's getting there. Hey, every journey starts
But we
with a
have
step.
100 plus followers on our Twitter account.
Yep.
It took me months to get 100. It took me a long time to get 100 followers on my Twitter account.
Right. And so far, I don't think any of them are bots. I've looked at the list. They all seem like they're actual
Twitter
people.
killed all the bots. Yeah.
They didn't kill them all. They killed some.
Yeah. They didn't kill our bots.
Right. So, all right, let's wrap it up. Episode 2 is done. Episode 3, I think we're going to talk about some product releases. I did most of the talking on this one. I think Jeff's going to mention all the 18.2 stuff and what those features entail from the SQL Dev, from SQL CL, Data Modeler, ORDS, etc. So,
cool.
We'll see you on the next one. Thanks for watching.